When I was in the seminary, I had a very good friend. He and I had been friends all through high school. He led a very wild life, and my parents were deadly afraid that he would lead me away from the seminary. And he confided to me several times that he was deadly afraid I would lead him into the seminary. But anyway, he was, in my second year in the seminary, killed in an automobile accident where he was driving drunk, and there were 4 young ladies in the car who died with him. I was going into my spiritual director. The spiritual director says, "I know what's wrong with you." I said, "What do you mean?" He says, "You're not really upset about his death." He says, "You're convinced he went to hell." He murdered 4 people, and you could count what he did as a suicide. He was drunk, And he said, "Have you ever read the Beatitude? Blessed are the sorrowful, for they shall be comforted." I said, "Yes." He said, "The purpose for the Beatitude is exactly what I'm going to show you." He said, "Why are you convinced that he went to hell?" Of course, it's just the circumstances of his death. And he said, "If you were God, what would you have done?" I said, "Well, he was a typical high school Catholic in a Catholic boys' school. He went to confession Saturday morning, went to Mass and Communion Sunday, then slipped back into the real world on Monday, okay? So I would wait till he came out of the confessional on Saturday and hit him with a truck, Then he could live forever in heaven." The priest looked at me and he said, "You think you love him more than God did. If you would go to that extent in order to see him saved, do you really think God loved him less? You don't think God set up a situation somehow that he would be saved?" He said, "That's heresy." He said, "Human sorrow and human difficulty is the sacrament of how God feels. So in the world where we're around, if I insult a person, the way they feel is a sacrament of the way God feels about it. When I console a person and help them, the way they respond is the sacrament of how God feels about what goes on." He says, people who are truly affected by tragedy in the world can be consoled by the fact that God is just as concerned as you. The real difference between you and I and God, he can do something and we can't.